If you were to eat 8 spinach smoothies, you could drop dead from the amount of oxalate. 80% of all kidney stones are primarily built from calcium oxalate. If you don't have oxalate, you cannot build a stone. It's impossible.
Sally K. Norton,
best-selling author and world-leading oxalate specialist.
She'll reveal the 30 foods you think are healthy but are secretly sabotaging your health.
One of the biggest sources of kidney stones are potatoes.
Really?
Yeah, because your ability to get the calories and the protein out of your proteins are reduced by these plant chemicals. They're touted as being so great because there's some theories, but we know that phytase, tannins, and oxalates interfere with your nutrition and make your nutrition suboptimal. That's really the truth. Building crystals of oxalate helps the plant defend itself from predators, you might say, because these crystals they form are very sharp. They're literally weaponry to damage cells. So that will puncture a cell in your mucosal membranes of your throat and your mouth 2 cells deep.
Do you think that we need to eat any vegetables or plants or fruits to survive if every plant has these defense chemicals?
Well,
what if some of the healthy foods that you're eating every single day, foods like green smoothies, dark chocolate, tea, or even your favorite nut butter, were slowly making you sick? Now, if you have problems like thyroid issues, brain fog, inflammation, fatigue, or even insulin resistance, chances are these healthy foods have a hidden toxin in them called oxalates that is slowly destroying your health. And when you try going on a low oxalate diet or even carnivore, your body can go through a painful process called oxalate dumping. And this is not something that your doctor will tell you about. My guest today is Sally Norton, and she is the queen of oxalates and plant toxins. And she'll explain how all of these foods that you're eating every day can cause some serious chronic health issues. She'll also explain the 30 common foods that are worst and high in oxalates, and some easy swaps, and a very easy carnivore-approved egg drink that can help neutralize oxalates. So Sally, my first question, what are the worst healthy foods that people are eating every single day that is slowly making them sick?
Well, it might depend on the person, but there are foods now that all of us are picking one of them that could be really undermining your health. And for some people, it's spinach and their spinach smoothies. For some people, it's their dark chocolate treats. Some people, it's their chia bowls. And other people, it's just like peanut butter.
So what's so bad about those foods? Because I think people are going to be thinking, I might be eating these every day, a combination of them. What's so bad about them, Sally?
Yeah, they have a natural substance in there that gets you into trouble. Slowly, secretly, behind the scenes, can be messing up your digestion, your immune system, your bone health, your urinary tract, and worst of all, your brain, nervous system, and vision. Could be slowly getting undermined in this sort of time bomb kind of thing, where in the short run, you're really completely unaware of it. And then at some point, the whole thing explodes in your face and can be serious enough to be disabling.
Mm-hmm. What's the name of this chemical compound that's lurking in those foods?
It's called oxalate, which is just becoming a thing now, thanks to my book and things. But it used to be, you say the word oxalate and it sounds like some planet they're discovering. It's like so unfamiliar. Oxalate or oxalic acid is naturally made in nature. Plants make it, soil funguses make it. It even gets made in pollution. The moisture and the sunlight work together, and it's in acid rain. So oxalic acid is an acid that makes rain acid, and it grabs minerals. It grabs calcium and forms these crystals. And crystals and acids, toxic acids and crystals that you're eating can cause some really mess up your basic general chemistry of your body. Your body needs electrolytes moving in and out of cell membranes, being carefully controlled, and it just mucks that up.
Absolutely. So I've got a list here of the foods that you mentioned, plus a few more. Plus we're going to mention actually 30 other foods in 9 subcategories. And that's also from your book, Toxic Superfoods. But here I have spinach, as you mentioned, a toxic superfood. How many oxalates is in spinach per 3.5 ounce or 100 grams?
For 100 grams, I think we're at about 1,000. Now, this is like some kind of test.
No, I've got the numbers here.
I don't recommend memorizing, but it's about 1,000 milligrams. That's a whole gram. A gram, that's a lot because they think you're eating 1/10 of that every day. So that the medical people, even the clinical dietitians will say, no big deal. Everyone eats 100 maybe 200 a day. 100 grams of spinach just isn't that much. Usually in a salad, you're eating half of that, but in a spinach smoothie, you could easily be eating that much or more. So 1,000 is a whole gram. That's literally 8 times more than your body can handle.
Mhm. That's why I asked, because I think people don't understand, okay, spinach maybe not good, or maybe people don't even love spinach, but 1,000 milligrams is crazy. And how much can the average person that doesn't have kidney stones or kidney problems, how many oxalates can they handle?
About 200 max, somewhere. That's the healthy person. A person with kidney problems should be well under 100 a day. So, yeah, it's 10 times too much for a kidney person and 8 times too much for a normal person. It's just too much. And that's what people don't understand, that there's a kind of dose response with toxins, where a little bit you can tolerate, and we're built to handle some. The kidneys know about oxalate, the body knows about oxalate, because a tiny little bit gets made in the body, about 12 milligrams, 12, not 1,000. That's real different. And your body can handle that 12. In fact, your body is built to handle 26 inside your bloodstream and body, 26 milligrams a day. And when you eat, say, 200 or 300 milligrams of oxalate in your spinach or almond milk or whatever, you're getting at least 26 from that food. So now you have to add in the 12 that you're producing. And there you are getting closer to 40. And that's now at a level that's causing chronic stress for the kidneys.
Absolutely. I've got some other foods here. So it's not a test for you because I got the numbers, but just so that people can understand, okay, so almonds per 3.5 ounce or 100 grams, 450 milligrams of oxalates. For reference, you said the average person who's healthy can handle 200 milligrams.
So can we just think about almonds? Because a lot of people are eating them as almond milk these days. Now, when you make almond milk, you really extract the oxalic acid part and get rid of the fiber and the other junk, and you put it in this water, because it's basically a tiny handful of almonds in a big chunk of water. Now, when you take oxalic acid, which is this dissolved ion, and you put it in all that water, you dilute it, and you make it much easier to get it into your bloodstream. So it just floats in all that water. So by diluting it, you have less oxalate, but more of it is toxic because more of it's getting into your bloodstream, affecting your vascular system, your white and red blood cells in your liver right after you eat it. So the numbers aren't telling us the whole story. That kind of what we call solubility and that diluted delivery package in either a smoothie, a juice, or a almond milk or almond beverage, that could get you to a style of or a form of it that makes it worse, even at what the numbers seem lower. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So what's worse, eating whole almonds or drinking almond milk?
They're both terrible for lots of reasons. The whole almonds, they have other things in them. Nuts are full of phytates and lectins and heavy metals naturally as part of what they do. They're the babies of the next generation for the tree. And the tree is not really interested in having everybody eat their babies. And this thing has to stay dormant and then know the right moment to germinate. Because if it germinates at the wrong time, it's not going to be a tree. So this dormancy process requires a lot of chemicals, and including oxalic acid crystals around the outside of a lot of seeds and nuts. You've got a shell of oxalate crystals, and inside there's oxalic acid. And then when you germinate it, you can change it around, but it's still, or worse, oxalic acid. So when you eat the whole nut, you may not absorb as much. It's because you're not actually chewing it that well, and you can't break it down like the blender and the water does. But you're getting a lot of other substances that are harsh and cause a lot of stress in your digestive tract. So in the long run, we're just really, I don't think we're built to be squirrels and eat a squirrel style diet and really rely on nuts as a primary food or entree the way it is in modern times. Like, it's affordable now to use nuts. But when I was a kid, we used almonds as the garnish on Easter green beans. And we used marzipan and very special desserts where you only had small portions. It just wasn't an entree like it is now.
That's interesting that we're not built for a squirrel diet. That could be like a diet based on vegan and vegetarian diets. We're kind of meant to have an animal based or maybe a meat based diet. That's our superfoods, talking about Superfoods. So the next one is dark chocolate, 120 milligrams of oxalates, and that's 75 to 85%. So dark chocolate is not good for you.
No, and they use chocolate in these research studies to look at the toxicity of oxalate and how much, what happens in the kidneys and how quick it gets into the blood and the urine and all that. Because if you're a volunteer for a study, come in and have a hot chocolate or have a little piece of chocolate and we're going to take your blood and your urine. Is that okay? I'm like, okay. And so, it's so bioavailable. That is, it moves from the chocolate into your bloodstream quite easily, that it's used in research studies to study the toxic effects of oxalate. And yet the nutrition world has been saying dark chocolate is good for you because it has polyphenols, which is a questionable theory. The percent of cacao goes up. In general, that means more oxalate in it because it's not the cocoa butter fatty part. It's the dark powder chocolate part, the cocoa part that has the oxalate.
I can't tell you how many years I used to eat dark chocolate when I was keto before I was carnivore, because I've been carnivore for the past 5 years. And then when I heard from you that, dark chocolate's not good for you because of the oxalates, I just look at dark chocolate and I think, okay, plant toxins. So these are some of the healthy foods, but I do want to talk more about more healthy foods in categories so that people do have a sub list of what to avoid, but most importantly, what to eat instead. So I want to focus on, again, what are oxalates? Why are there oxalates in plants by themselves? What does it serve? Like, what is the purpose?
Right. It's so interesting. The botanists they don't get funded as well as other researchers, but they've been working on this for a long time. And they found like 5, 6, maybe 7 reasons why plants make oxalic acid. And a lot of plants, first they make it vitamin C. And then they turn the vitamin C into oxalic acid because it just naturally does that easily. So vitamin C oxidizes and degrades into oxalic acid. So that's another thing we should address, because as we're taking vitamin C supplements, we're creating more oxalate in tender tissues like your brain, which probably you need to know about that. So the plants make this vitamin C to make oxalic acid, and that lets them manage their calcium because they're growing in soils that are high in calcium, and a little calcium is super important for them, but too much calcium in the wrong place becomes toxic for a living cell. So by grabbing that calcium, you can control it, contain it, store it, and you can store it like those crystals around the seeds is a storage form of calcium that when the seed germinates, it can use that calcium as a cofactor in enzymes to start building amino acids and sprouting into a plant. And that liberates that oxalic acid. Also, you can liberate it when you need to fight funguses, because it basically works like a hydrogen peroxide. The plant leaf can turn that oxalic acid into a hydrogen peroxide and try to kill off molds and funguses that are trying to attack it. And building crystals of oxalate helps the plant defend itself from other kinds of predators, you might say. So when a beetle or an insect eats a leaf and it encounters sharp, pointy, because these crystals they form are very sharp. They form very, hard angles. And one is designed as a arrow. It's a toothpick shaped crystal. They make bundles of like 200 or 400 of them, of these arrows. They're literally weaponry to damage cells. So that arrow that the plant makes is called rapide, will puncture a cell in your mucosal membranes of your throat and your mouth 2 cells deep. That gets you right into the interstitial fluids, gets right into the body. So, and the arrow brings with it oxalic acid and proteases and things that can harm your tissues and create serious inflammatory reactions. So there's a plant called dumb cane that has a ton of these rapide crystals that's in the mall. We used to have malls, remember them? This cute little house plant that you see in tropical plant displays is this dumb cane, Dieffenbachia. It's called dumb cane because that reaction to those crystals paralyzes your vocal cords and swells up your mouth and you're unable to speak. Sometimes for as many as like 5 or 6, 7 days. There's an inflammatory reaction that starts to destroy your throat. It can paralyze the lungs and so on and be quite serious because you're having an immune reaction to that damage and that attack. So plants are using as weaponry. Trees will make little square, blocky crystals in their bark, when that makes it hard for beetles to bore into the tree. So there's defense against funguses, insects, there's storage of calcium. In the desert, there's a potential use for it for carbon because it's oxalic acid is kind of like 2 carbon dioxide molecules, and plants have different kinds of enzymes and can basically turn it into carbon dioxide, which is the oxygen of plants. And they can now, when it's too hot for them to breathe air in the daylight, the sun is bearing down on them. They have to close their little breathing holes under their leaves. And so they use that for a carbon source. All kinds. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Plants are clever. I think they're smarter than we are. They just don't speak our language. They're a whole different kind of Martian to us. They're so different than us, but they're doing a lot in the background to protect themselves and to survive. They need it for survival. That's their goal, is to survive and perpetuate their species, not to be food for us. That's not their primary goal.
So, question for you then. Do you think that we need to eat any vegetables or plants or fruits to survive if every plant has these defense chemicals?
Well, it's really interesting how we've learned to be resilient and handle harsh things. And sometimes harsh things are helpful, like UV light and sunlight is good for us. And we have defenses if we're eating properly. And there's this kind of love-hate relationship with things that stress us out, like exercise helps us bigger bones. So the question is that also true with plant chemicals? Does it have any kind of healthy stress on us? And I kind of think not. I don't think we need plants to give us healthy stress at all. I think we've made peace with them because they've helped us survive hard times. When you can't catch a fish or kill a whale or kill a woolly mammoth, what are you going to do? You're going to root around for what you can, have something portable and so on. And so they're starvation foods, and they've helped us survive. And they have some nutrients in there. And if we're digesting well, we can get some nutrients out of them. But there's some stress that they're causing that we don't need to thrive on. So I think we are surprised now in this age of embracing plants as a moral choice for 400 years. We've been told at least the last 300 years, we've been told that eating plants is more moral and more humane than not. So we've really put a halo around plant eating, but we've disregarded our heritage, which has been as hunter survivors who survived the Ice Age, who managed to populate the whole planet in places on the planet that don't really have plants, like, the frozen crusty parts near Alaska and things like that. Like we've lived there a long time, and that's because we do very well on an animal food diet.
I think you said that very nicely. So some people are very extreme to say no plants, and some people say all plants. But, we are meant to be eating meat and animals, and we thrive on a meat-based, fat-based diet. And the role for plants is, in the times of starvation, seasonal eating. Where has that gone? Really, all the foods are abundant all year round, and it really shouldn't be. Okay, let's get back to oxalates and how they actually directly impact on chronic disease. This is very fascinating. You have mentioned that oxalates can directly be linked towards Parkinson's and dementia. What is that link? How do those crystals get in the brain?
Well, they haven't really studied how they get in the brain that well. They haven't really studied how much the food oxalates are circulating in tissues and getting pushed in tissues. The best research was done by a gal named Susan Marengo, who studied rats. And she demonstrated very clearly that oxalate exposure will cause accumulation in all tissues of the body, even when the renal function, that is when your kidneys are doing great, they clear it out as fast as they can and be good and tough, fantastic, perfect kidneys, you still get accumulations from eating oxalic acid. Now, in the capillary beds, that's the fine little blood vessels that feed all your tissues their nutrients and carry away the toxins. There's a high pressure there, and you're pushing a lot of this fluid of the blood into tissues, and then the lymph kind of drains it. And so you're pushing oxalic acid into all your tissues after your meals. That oxalic acid goes from your food into your what we call hepatic circulation, which takes all of that stuff that you're absorbing from your food to your liver for processing. So all the cells of the liver get exposed to it, but they don't detox it. The liver does not take oxalate out of the blood. It does not change oxalate. It doesn't have any enzymes. All that does is damage the liver and use up glutathione in the liver. So there's no detox of oxalate in terms of liver enzymes. So then it goes straight from your liver up to the heart, which is just above the diaphragm. They're right there together. to get pumped into the lungs where you get oxygen. None of those tissues remove oxalate. They get exposed to it. So your vascular system, your white cells, your red cells, your liver, your heart, and your lungs get 100% of what you're eating after meals. And then when it gets into those tissues, it's being pushed into them by the vascular system. And then it's going all over the body. Later on, the kidneys get their chance to remove it. So it's getting into the tissues from the food, but also because a certain amount, maybe a quarter of the oxalate coming out in your urine, because that's the main excretion route, is coming from vitamin C that's degraded into oxalate. And I think for the brain in particular, this is just theory based on understanding a little bit of the physiology. That is the vitamin C sitting in your cells because you're eating too much in these supplements, more than you need, right? Because we're pushing huge amounts of vitamin C, especially since COVID. But really, since I was a little girl, Linus Pauling and others convinced people that vitamin C supplements are important. So it's not only in your vitamin supplements, it's in your various fortified foods, drink mixes, orange juices, all of that. It's pushed in there. So that vitamin C is more than you need. It's hanging around in cells and it degrades into oxalate. So I think some of the oxalate that's getting in your brain is coming from excessive vitamin C that doesn't have anything to do but turn into a toxin. So that would be nice to study that. And there's inflammation, when there's already damage and inflammation or infection or injury in tissues, it's possible for tissues to produce oxalate, but they've only documented that liver produces oxalate, some red blood cells, can produce oxalate, and the kidneys might produce oxalate. The other form of oxalate that's made in the body comes from the amino acid hydroxyproline and maybe a little glycine. So that's connective tissue. And the liver is what's processing all that. That's why it's being produced there. So there's inflammation that might cause some problems with the enzymes. And then there's vitamin C and there's oxalate itself. So you only have a couple choices. It's either the food you're eating or the supplements you're taking.
Now, as Sally mentions, we need to remove the oxalates and the plant toxins, especially because they not only damage our cells, but can also cause chronic disease. And later in the episode, we'll talk about the 30 common foods that are high in oxalates, but some very easy swaps so that you can fix your health. And talking about fixing your health, many people think that they should just follow the best diet or what are the best foods to eat. But a very important aspect that not many people think about is our mental health. And in fact, I did a very important episode with Dr. Georgia Ede. She's a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and that episode actually has 1.5 million views. And she says that if you wake up feeling down, brain fog, fatigue, or even anxiety, that is not a normal way of being. And I know this because I have felt this myself for most of my life. You see, I suffered from a mental health issue from a very young age, and it wasn't something that I could speak to my family or my friends about. But what I found completely fixed me, along with going keto and now carnivore, was to understand my thoughts and my emotions through therapy. And my therapist gave me so many different practical solutions, things like diaphragmatic breathing, journaling, gratitude, and this very interesting self-soothing activity. Basically, you rub your feet underneath a blanket. It sounds very strange, but it really works. And this has helped me so much, and that is why I have BetterHelp as a sponsor of today's episode. Now, you don't have to have a mental health issue to benefit from therapy. And in fact, BetterHelp is on a mission to help you achieve any of your health goals, whether it's dealing with emotional stress or trauma, or even sticking with a goal that you've set for this year. And it's really easy to get started. Simply fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. And if the first therapist doesn't feel quite right, you can easily switch to another one until you find someone you truly connect with. So if you feel that you're struggling or you're overwhelmed, you might want to consider therapy. Simply click on the link in the description of this episode or just head to betterhelp.com/primal podcast to get 10% off your first month of therapy. I want to understand for people watching, they might think, okay, I've had spinach, I've had almonds. How do I know if I have this oxalate overload? What are the symptoms that somebody could see?
Sometimes there aren't a lot of symptoms, and there's this 4-hour kind of period that's really about an 8-hour stretch after you've eaten a food where it's getting into your bloodstream and your urine. So about 4 hours after your meal, that might be the time when you have highest amount of oxalate in your blood, where you might feel those symptoms in an acute kind of way. So just in that transitory acute toxicity after the meals, 4 hours later, you might have a mood change. You might be grumpy or lose your motivation or feel tired or feel anxious or depressed or start thinking negatively, because it can create a neuroinflammation that gives us all those kind of symptoms. Even, forgetting your memory being poor or your spelling getting worse or something like that. That could be a symptom, or having trouble sleeping, getting some kind of tremors because it's a nerve toxin. So nerves start overfiring and causing muscle tremor. So things like hiccups, belching, twitching of eyes, that kind of stuff, even potentially incontinence or both urinary and fecal incontinence or constipation. These could be from sort of paralyzed muscles because the nerves are toxic. So there's that stuff. There's potentially things like nighttime urination, having to wake up and pee when you really should be able to sleep through the night, having to pee frequently, having large volumes of pee, having cloudy urine because the crystals can start forming as you're forming urine. The oxalic acid starts connecting with the calcium in the urine and makes crystals, and that can make the urine look kind of whitish, a little bit opaquish. It should be real clear. Urine should look like water with the tiny bit of yellow color to it. But if your urine looks cloudy and you don't have a serious infection, chances are that's a sign that you've got too much oxalate in your body and your diet.
That's interesting. So your urine should just be a light pale yellow color. If it's too clear, does that mean that you're overhydrated?
Not always. No, I can produce, now that I'm off of oxalates, I can produce a clear urine even when I'm not drinking enough. So if it's muddy looking in any way, that's either cell debris or oxalate crystals, most likely.
Interesting. And then you're just peeing out the oxalate crystals?
You are, because most of us have great kidneys that can do that. Very few people end up with kidney stones, about 12% of the population. The rest of us have redundant systems to be able to handle too much oxalate in the kidneys. Amazing. It's so cool what they can do to prevent us from getting kidney stones. And it confuses the research because if you are a kidney stone person and I am not, and we're both eating spinach smoothies every day and you get your kidney stones and I don't, then the doctors say, or the researchers say, well, obviously it's not the oxalate causing the kidney stones because both Rina and Sally eat the same amount of too much oxalate and only Rina gets it. So it's some other thing that's causing her stones. No. If we think about this together, if we had a logical moment, a kidney stone is made of calcium oxalate crystals. 80% of all kidney stones are primarily built from calcium oxalate. If you don't have oxalate in your urine, you cannot build a stone. It's impossible. So you can't say, oh, oxalates don't matter. That's the most irrational thing. And yet that's what they say in the literature all the time. That's what your doctors believe. That's what your dietitians believe and will say out loud. It's so silly. Makes no sense.
It's crazy. It's so interesting talking about kidney stones and oxalate kidney stones, and you're talking about almonds. So my coach, who's my coach on my carnivore community, her husband is carnivore at home, but then when she's not home, then maybe we'll eat some other foods. So anyway, he likes to buy lots of foods, and so he bought these big bags of almonds, and we're having these huge bags of almonds. Fast forward, he's getting these kidney stones, passing painful in the hospital because he's having so many almonds. Who would have thought? Kidney stones.
One of the biggest sources of kidney stones are potatoes.
Really?
Yeah, French fries and potato chips because they're very popular and you can get into a lifestyle with them starting at age 10 and be eating some form of potato product like that every day and get yourself into big trouble. A lot of my men who are kidney stone people are potato addicts. They love their potatoes.
Wow. Okay, let's go into the 30 bad foods. Well, higher oxalate foods and some easy swaps. So you mentioned the potatoes, so that comes under starches and tubers. Why are those bad and what should we eat instead?
Well, if you're using them kind of like mashed potato, that's easy to replace with cauliflower and turnips and rutabaga. And I have some recipes on my website and in my cookbook on my website for that. If you're trying to make French fries and stuff, you can make crunchy foods. Personally, I think the equivalent is crunchy bacon because it's outside's crunchy and the inside's all greasy and it's salty and it has that whole experience of the French fry, except for the starch melting in your mouth. So a piece of bacon might satisfy that. And there are other kind of chippy kind of things you can do. Depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for crunch, salt, fat, starch, it depends on what you're trying to do with it. But they say you're putting together a Thanksgiving meal or something that's kind of classic and you want that mashed vegetable. There's plenty of white vegetables and pale yellow vegetables that make a beautiful mash if you know how to not have them be as watery. So the difference between potatoes is much starchier than those non-starchy vegetables. So you have to kind of dry them out more. So you can either set them back in the pan and let them kind of work off their extra steam, or set them in the oven and kind of give them a slight drying process so that you have not so much water so they don't collapse. If you want that nice fluffy mashed potato consistency, there's just a few techniques like that, using plenty of salt, lots of butter, and you can even fancy it up with a little cream cheese or cottage cheese or something to get that nice, rich mashed potato flavor. Baked potatoes, you can create other things that hold whatever it is you're putting on that baked potato that you really want it for. You can use cheeses to do that. You can use a little creativity in the kitchen, and you can swap it out.
Okay, so that was category number 1, starches and tubers. So sweet potatoes, white potatoes, yucca or cassava. I don't think many people have that.
Well, everyone knows somebody who's either celiac or gluten-free for some other reason. And they're using things like almond flour, cassava flour. They're using things like quinoa, buckwheat. All these non-gluten foods are quite high in oxalate.
Okay, well, that was part of my other list. Where's my category? Let me just go back to my categories. Okay, so the first one was starches and tubers, as you mentioned. So the next one is leafy greens. So we mentioned that at the beginning, but spinach is one, beet greens is another, and Swiss chard.
Yeah, chard and beet greens are technically the same vegetable. It's just that the chard doesn't know how to make the beet. And they're both worse than spinach. They are the worst.
Really?
Yeah, they're a little bit worse than spinach. And sorrel is up there, and rhubarb is up there in this category. And that's it. I mean, that's it for leafy greens. It's really just sorrel, which no one eats, charred beet greens, which is kind of the same thing, and spinach. That's all. The other leafy greens are fine.
What to eat instead?
So and all the lettuces, watercress, arugula, the little mini Asian greens, all of them are real low. Romaine lettuce, practically nothing.
Okay, so I've got here arugula, romaine, mustard greens, collard greens, bok choy, kale. Okay, next category is nuts and seeds. So we mentioned the almonds. What are other nuts on the list that we shouldn't have?
Cashews, peanuts, and then the others get kind of a little less worse, but things like most of the nuts, like small amounts of walnuts are okay. Small amounts of macadamia nuts are okay. As long as your gut can handle the seediness of them. I really think seeds are designed to be indigestible. They're supposed to be consumed and pooped out according to the tree that made them or the plant that made them. They're really not interested in being digestible. So if you have any inflammation issues or digestive issues or immune issues, I think they're trouble. Generally, even the low oxalate seeds like pumpkin seeds are great. You want to sprout them, have them salted. They're versatile. You can turn them into a butter and replace peanut butter with a pumpkin seed butter. But if you're having health problems, you want to be cautious about seeds and nuts because I think they're hard to digest, even sprouted, even properly prepared.
Mm-hmm. So I have here as alternatives, just having butter would be like a nice fat. Yes, like free some butter. It's good. Have you tried brown butter bites?
I have not, but I can imagine how they're done and that they would be great. They kind of like caramel.
Yeah. So another solution would be coconut flakes. Maybe that might be a better option.
Yes, and coconut flakes can cook up into like little cookie things. I've got a recipe in my cookbook how you kind of glue them together. And you can sweeten them and turn them into a cookie that others could eat that has no gluten, no eggs, no dairy. And it's really great for the sort of sensitive people who are on these elimination, whether a carnivore or not. Like there are cheat days for carnivores that the coconut might be the place to go for that.
Oh, don't say cheat days to carnivores because they might think, oh my God, no, we have to be strict.
Occasionally you have family events or you have holidays or whatever, and you try to blend just a tiny bit.
Well, if you want to cheat on carnivore, do keto. That's always a better option than standard American diet.
A lot of these keto foods are high oxalate. So if you're going to do a carnivore, or if you're going to do a keto diet, really that's how you end up carnivore because so many of the low carb plant foods are high in oxalate and have other problems. And it just can be not getting where you want to be because you're trying to optimize your health. So the goal is to get results, not just to follow some rule book.
Absolutely. Next category is fruits. So, what are the worst high oxalate fruits to avoid?
Kiwi, star fruit. Thank God Westerners don't eat it, but in other countries, it's a superfood like spinach, star fruit, and star fruit juice. They're the bad ones, and like the citrus peel that you make. What do you call it? Fruitcake in like Christmas time. The fruitcake, that stuff is loaded with oxalate. The good thing about the fruits is the fruits tend to make crystals in this not as much soluble oxalic acid. So the fruit, if you eat it whole and don't purify it into like a juice or a smoothie, if you don't beat it up, the vacuoles and stuff can kind of sort of protect you a little bit from the crystals, and there's not as much oxalic acid in them to absorb. So again, with the numbers, some of the fruits that are high oxalate, you can get away with it some, but generally it's the blackberries, raspberries, kiwi. Kiwi, just stay away from it, and star fruit.
Now, as Sally mentioned, some common foods like fruit and kiwis are very high in oxalates. And I'll actually link Sally's book down in the description so that you have an easy reference of the foods that are high in oxalates and some very easy swaps. But quite interestingly, it is not just high oxalate foods that can cause disease. Chemicals in our skincare, such as parabens and phthalates, have actually been linked to disease. They can actually disrupt hormones and even cause insulin resistance. Because whatever you put on your skin can penetrate what's called the blood-brain barrier, and that can get into our cells, potentially causing long-term issues. When I found out about this, it completely changed my life. Because as you know, I have followed a high-fat carnivore lifestyle for the past few years, and it's helped me heal so many different chronic health issues. But I still didn't realize I was exposing my skin to toxins through my everyday skincare. And I used to use 10 different skincare products, but now I only use one. It's 100% grass-fed, chemical-free tallow balm. Now you might be thinking, Rina, why would you put tallow on your skin? Well, this has helped my skin so much. It's improved the hydration, my skin texture, and even the moisturization, as I generally have very sensitive acne-prone skin. And that is why I created the Primal Tallow Balms as a chemical-free solution for my skin, but also for your skin. The Primal Tallow Balms contain 100% grass-fed, grass-finished tallow that naturally contains vitamins A, D, E, and K2. So what does that mean for you? Well, you could experience better skin texture, better hydration, and even better moisturization. And the best thing, there's no preservatives, there's no nasties, it is just pure tallow. And I love to use this unscented balm every single day. Just one dollop lasts me 24 hours. So if you want to be chemical free from the inside out, pick up a tallow balm. Just head to shop.theprimal.com and get 10% off your next order. Okay, so getting back to fruits, what to eat instead. So blueberries, I've got here, pears, apricots. Maybe just like don't eat fruits that often because you can get nutrient density from animal products. But let's move on to the next few categories. So grains and flours. So buckwheat and quinoa you mentioned, not good. What to have instead? White rice? Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. There's very few grains that are like really reliably low oxalate, and they're variable. There's a lot of different species of, say, corn and wheat and so on, and different processing methods. And see, the other thing that makes oxalate is mold. And if your grain hasn't been properly handled, if it was harvested when wet, left in the field, stored wrong, stored too long, there could be molds growing in them. And there's one mold, Aspergillus, that will produce oxalate. So the amount of oxalate in wheat flour can vary because of species and because of handling. So it's hard to know like how much of this flour is okay. Whereas with rice just generally isn't going to accumulate or make that much oxalate, and white rice in particular, because the oxalate tends to be in the bran, which is the outer layer of the grain. Remember I was saying like seeds, which grains are seeds, use oxalic acid and oxalic crystals to give a firm coat that helps them stay dormant and protects them for lasting as a dormant seed. So when you remove the bran, you remove a huge amount of the oxalate and other toxins in plants.
Okay. That's not to say that people should eat white rice. Maybe if you're somehow having it, it's a better option than, for example, quinoa, because quinoa is touted as, oh my God, this health food, but it's really not healthy. So the next one is quite interesting around drinks. So black tea is really not good for you.
Well, we use it all the time to try to moderate, like going too low in oxalate can cause some issues. So we use it all the time for people who tolerate it. But it's got a lot of things in it, like tea extracts, and they turn them into supplements, are known to be toxic. Like there's tannins are toxic and other compounds are toxic. And then it has oxalate too. But decaf tea has less oxalate in it by a little bit. And all the herbal teas have almost no oxalate in them. There's very few herbal teas that have oxalate. So if you like a nice hot drink, you can do it with lots of substances if you're interested in that.
So what about bone broth or even a melted butter drink instead? Is that a better option than tea?
Yeah, it depends on the person, but yes, in moderation, I wouldn't do more than 2 cups of bone broth a day, depending on how rich it is with gelatin, because it's the gelatin, amino acids, the hydroxyproline principally, that can become oxalate in the body, and you literally can overload you. If you're eating more than about a tablespoon of gelatin, which, when you're making Jello, that gelatin, that will turn 2 cups of liquid into Jello. So if you're doing more than 2 cups of a broth that's so rich that it turns to Jello in your refrigerator, then 2 cups is enough. More, probably, if you're doing it every day, eventually bordering on too much.
Wow. Okay. All right. We mentioned the dark chocolate, so under the category of snacks, treats, and sweeteners. Dates as well are no good. Maybe have some figs instead. Is that right?
Oh, that's backwards.
Figs is bad. Have dates instead.
Yes. That's a great one to mess up because WebMD or some big website has that mixed up and it's calling dates high. And so I wrote a whole blog post about that. So check out my blog on my website. I talk about dates and the confusion about dates and figs and all that. That's a perfect mistake. Thank you. I couldn't have planted a better one.
Well, next one is vegetables. So we mentioned, okra, rhubarb, celery, and carrots, high oxalate.
Pretty high. I mean, celery and carrots are kind of moderately high. So a little bit here and there, a little bit in the soup or the broth or whatever is not going to kill anybody. But you don't want to start living on carrot juice and celery juice. It just concentrates it. And like we said, the juicing process makes what oxalate is there more bioavailable, therefore more toxic.
Okay, what to eat instead? Zucchini, cucumber, cranberries, turnip, fennel, iceberg lettuce. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know why fennel is on the list because fennel is one of those medium ones like celery.
Okay, take them off then. That's fine. I'm asking the oxalate queen here. So, I've got my list, but you tell me.
Yeah, it's very, and so there's most of the lists online are just not right. And the lists in the textbooks, the nursing textbook, one of the nursing textbooks that I looked at in the library, the medical library, had like 36 items on the list and 9 of them were wrong. They said, these are the high oxalate foods and 9 of them were low oxalate foods. That's in a nursing textbook. And that data came from the American Dietetics Association. This is coming from the official profession of nutrition is putting out bad data.
Okay, let's get through to the last 2 categories. So this one for sure, legumes. Beans are not good.
They are not. They are starvation foods for sure. Yeah.
Oh my God, I feel sorry for somebody that loves to eat. Like my mom loves to have lentils, but lentils is lentils part of it?
They're not high in oxalate, but they're very high in lectins. So you need to do the classic, like in India, they know to use pressure cooking and turn it into this dal that's real thin and because they've cooked them to death. And that's what you need to do to deal with lectins. Most people in India use pressure cookers. It was out of fashion until recently here. Now people have more pressure cooker options. But the research says that these beans and seeds should be soaked for 3 to 4 days to be sure you break dormancy and then pressure cook them to make them safe in terms of lectins. Nobody's soaking their beans for 3 to 4 days. That just isn't happening. So yeah, beans are a compromise. They're storable. They're lightweight. You can put them on a chuck wagon and go conquer the Wild West. You can do stuff with them. They're practical. They're cute. They're not nutritionally optimal.
Nope. Okay, so I've got here soybeans that we shouldn't have, navy beans, black beans, what to have instead. So you mentioned lentils are okay, but you have to cook them in a way that avoids the lectins. Black-eyed peas and lima beans.
Yeah, the lima beans. And then there's, what's another one? Chickpeas aren't too bad. The peas generally, so green peas, chickpeas, and black-eyed peas are much lower than the beans. And the worst beans are the white and black. The white ones is what we make like sort of Boston baked beans with, your standard summer baked beans. So we're talking in the summer and you can get yourself in bean salad and then the baked beans and start adding in potato salad. Like summer is a time when people surprisingly are getting a lot of oxalate. And then comes the fall, we have chocolate and almonds.
It's oxalate all year round.
Yeah, you can switch your oxalate horse every season.
Okay, last category is superfood powders and spices. So turmeric and cumin.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think spices, if you're sick, you know how we put black pepper in with turmeric in order to force the body and the liver to not be capable of protecting itself from turmeric and not absorbing it because the body doesn't want to absorb curcumin. And so we add black pepper to force it. That's, I think, loading spices up will force the toxicity of foods generally. And so I think there's a lot of oxalates in black pepper and cumin and turmeric and so on, and a lot of spices that are in Indian food. That combination of the oxalate plus the other substances in there is kind of toxic. And if you're sick, you really got to carve back this really high spicy, high oxalate spices. If you go to like white pepper, rosemary, if a few herbs and salt and pepper, you can do a lot culinarily and you can really save yourself some stress and problems.
Absolutely. So that was around 30 kind of superfoods that we should be avoiding and what to eat instead. I do want to talk about oxalate dumping, but first I want to understand superfoods. What the heck does that term mean? And is there any real superfood out there?
Yeah, so superfood was some kind of invention. I'm trying to remember my research when I was reading about that about 5 years ago. But it's the concept that somehow you get extra benefits beyond just some nutrition, that it's some kind of going to charge something great about your body and help you be bolder, bigger, better, age less quickly. But it's really a kind of a marketing idea. But there are foods that are nutrient dense that carry critical nutrients that really can help with repair and recovery. Things like egg yolks, oysters, liver in moderation. You can overdo vitamin A, it's possible. But really, dairy products can be superfoods depending on who you are. Back in the days before antibiotics and so on, there was something called the milk cure where people would come to the sanitarium, the hospital, and be placed in lounge chairs out in the sun and be given 2 gallons of milk. And they'd sit there in the sun and drink milk and get better from infectious disease. So even milk could be a superfood, right? And definitely things like egg yolks and liver and these kind of organ meats and these sort of odd bits. There's some powerful nutrition in there. Like the choline in an egg yolk is so important for brain development. It's seen as the most critical nutrient in fetal development for intelligence. So if you want to produce an intelligent baby, you need to eat 2 eggs a day while pregnant and breastfeeding.
Wow. Well, I eat 6 eggs a day. My husband has 7 eggs a day. I follow a carnivore diet. He's predominantly carnivore. So question. Oh, actually, I wanted to mention the other superfoods here. So you mentioned liver, egg yolks, wild caught salmon, sardines, grass-fed beef, other superfoods. Yeah.
A sardine is just awesome. The whole sardine has the skin. You got the collagen. It has the bones with the calcium. It often has roe. Roe is one of these superfoods that has very intense nutrients in it. So there's often little pregnant fishies with the roe in there. And the protein and the omega-3s, it's like one standard little can of sardines has the right amount of omega-3s to prompt muscle development. So when I was discovered that I couldn't eat beef anymore and I switched to eating more sardines than ever, I was surprised that I didn't lose muscle mass on fish because there's a lot of sort of anti-fish mentality amongst carnivores. And I found, no, my muscles are doing as well as ever. And that's because those fats in the fish really promote healthy muscles. It's cool. My secret for a good workout is 1 can of sardines before the workout. It's like half an hour before you go to the gym. It's awesome.
I tried to do a sardine challenge on my carnivore group. Didn't go down that well. I mean, they like the high fat challenge and the dairy free challenges, but when it comes to sardines, people don't love to eat them. But do you know what's funny? That when you eat sardines, you actually feel really good after. And I think it's the high omega-3 content also in the sardines. So again, another superfood.
They must be pretty easy to digest. I think, the fact that I can run to the gym and I could work out in 5 minutes after a can of sardines, they're just like better than those powders. People think they have to buy these plastic tubs full of random powders and drink that before or after workouts. And I'm telling you, a can of sardines I like coconut water as a recovery drink mixed with raw milk.
Interesting.
Is a really nice recovery drink for serious athletes.
And you do work out a lot. So just to preface that, Sally has some good guns and you do work out and you're very, very fit. So, and then you do incorporate some moderate amount of carbohydrates. But just to say that if somebody is following low carb, zero carb, what we're focusing on is nutrient density. And as we mentioned, the superfoods of grass-fed beef, egg yolks. You mentioned the beef liver sometimes, and then also the sardine. So animal-based way of living is quite healthy because some people have a problem with carbohydrates. But I just want to make sure that people understand.
Some people have a trouble without the carbohydrates, and that's me because I was full carnivore starting April 1st, 2019. And by June, I was dead. I could not sleep. I could not function. I was in pain all the time. I couldn't take the right train exit. It was terrible. And I can only last so long on super zero carb. And I think a lot of women, especially my age, but a lot of women need some amount of carbs here and there and need to do some carb pulsing. And so I think what's the most important message is this nutrient density and understanding that especially women tend to not eat enough protein. They're afraid of meat. They're afraid of butter. We've been raised to be afraid of things we need like salt and so on. And so the most important thing is get nutrient density and learn from your body, be the servant of your body to feel well, to sleep well, to perform well, and use common sense about how that all works. But there's some tweaking to do, about what's going to work for you at different stages. Some people, it's just during their period or something like that, where they need some carbs or whatever. But to me, it's like, I don't want anyone to accept too many rules in their head. I want them to accept principles, information, and respect for their well-being. That's the key thing. Keep that value in place of the best food I can, optimal nutrition for optimal performance. And however that works for you, it's okay. It's okay if you can't be 100% keto or 100% anything, because those are just guidelines, not things to break yourself on.
Yep, absolutely. Not everybody has to be carnivore. Not everybody has to be keto or ketovore or low carb. And just to bear that in mind that these are all words, but absolutely we need to follow a nutrient-dense diet. And everyone's a little bit different in terms of what they can tolerate. And it really comes down to previous health struggles or problems and also our cultural differences. My background is Indian, so perhaps I can, have other foods that maybe you couldn't have. So this is where that variation comes in. But overall, the overarching message is nutrient density. Because when people say different things and I follow this diet, the overall picture is nutrient density. It doesn't come from plants. It comes from meat and animals.
Animal foods. And that nutrient density is nutrient bioavailability, like digestibility. The plant foods have these substances. I mean, the tannins and the phytates and all these, they are enzyme inhibitors. So your ability to get the calories and the protein out of your proteins are reduced by these plant chemicals. They're touted as being so great because there's some theories that there might be some anti-inflammatory effects or whatever, but we know that phytates, tannins, and oxalates interfere with your nutrition and make your nutrition suboptimal. That's really the truth. And I think the bigger world out there is still buying Little Debbie cookies and having French fries and using holidays and vacations as excuses to justify that. And eventually you're going to hit the skids and then are you going to go for smoothies with spinach and do this kind of what is really nonsense sort of superfood approach to kind of fix yourself, or use vegetables as an excuse to have a dessert? Because that's how you've been raised. Like, eat your vegetables so you can have your dessert. And we're having that mentality. Like, if I have my smoothie, then I can have my French fries. That's like the two worst combinations you could come up with, but that's the mentality. So now we're saying to people, look, just forget culture and everything that the whole world is thinking, the way they're thinking about, okay, have some spinach smoothie or a big spinach salad so you can justify a chocolate pie. You got to walk away from all of that mess the way we're thinking. And so we really have to dig deep for some values and self-respect and just be willing to be somewhat independent in your thinking and behavior. That's a special person who walks away from their culture or their norms. But we have norms that include, like, drinking is fine. Drinking is good. People will pressure you to drink alcohol. and we're willing to give in to an unhealthy culture. In this world right now, we have so much crises going on with people's illnesses, this diabetes crises, the mental health crises. People are dropping dead in drug overdoses because there's so much misery, both physical and mental, emotional pain. People are struggling to cope with trauma and recover because of our nutrition and our toxic world. We have to be brave enough to step out of the cultural bounds that we've been raised in and are all around us and be a little different. And that's why your work is so important, because you're helping people cope with a world that's pulling them in the wrong direction. They want to be part of a community that we're both promoting, of people who are striving for optimal health, validating that that's important and valuable and respectable.
Oh, that's very nice of you. And you do absolutely incredible work. Actually, every single person I've spoken to, if I ever bring up oxalates, they're like, speak to Sally Norton. She's an oxalate queen and she knows everything about it. So you are amazing. Okay, question about oxalate dumping. Now, this is something that I hear a lot from carnivores, because maybe they try carnivore and they're like, I'm oxalate dumping. What is oxalate dumping?
Well, this is a process where the body's attempt to remove accumulated oxalate can get out of hand and get toxic. So that term was founded by a woman called Susan Owens, but what she's describing there is this clearing mechanism that turns on systemic inflammation and can cause a mobilization of little crystalline oxalate from tissues and turn it back into oxalic acid, which is the most toxic form, is these nanocrystals in this oxalic acid. It's like eating spinach salads and smoothies, maybe 10 of them at one time. If you were to eat 8 spinach smoothies, you could drop dead from the amount of oxalate. And so this releasing of oxalates is an inflammatory process where the immune cells are attacking crystals, and that's very difficult work, not always successful. It creates systemic inflammation that can create pain. So most aging, disease, and pain and suffering is some form of inflammation. These crystals are sitting there being a target of inflammation. So it's very much like having asbestosis, which is particulate matter in the lungs, asbestos fibers in the lungs, and you get chronic immune activation that destroys your lungs, and you either need new lungs or you die. And that is the same kind of toxicity with this particulate matter of the oxalate crystals. In the literature, they equate oxalate with silica and asbestos. So it's almost like you have asbestos poisoning, but it's in your pituitary gland and other glands of the brain, and your teeth and jaw, your ears and your eyes, your bone marrow, your bones, your vascular system, your breast tissue, and so on. And so the immune system turns on. That in itself is unpleasant and can make you kind of miserable. And then you're spewing oxalate back out. It causes more vascular stress, potentially damage to the capillary beds, potentially kidney damage. You can create a kidney stone while too much oxalate is mobilizing. So you may never have gotten kidney stones till you stop eating oxalate. And this is another reason why the researchers are confused. It's after you stop eating the stuff when the body tries to get rid of it. So in my world, I'm putting people back on beet juice, rhubarb jam, these really ridiculously high oxalate foods in little amounts, so we can signal to the body that deaccumulation process needs to be slowed down or stopped. Because there's this trigger and maintenance science that I talk about in Toxic Superfoods that shows that a certain level of oxalate coming in from outside, that's your food, will tell the body that, we got to hold on to it. And that's when you get this accumulation. But also we want to sometimes just leave it in place, because too much moving around can land you in the emergency room with hypertension and heart palpitations, potentially stroke or heart attack. It's called a heart block, because the electrolytes get messed up, because oxalic acid grabs what? Calcium, right? You need the right amount of calcium in your blood. And when the calcium level drops, it's called hypocalcemia. That's dangerous, can cause all kinds of symptoms or be no symptoms at all. And then your body's like, if it can't replace that quickly, it'll start drilling holes in the bones, thinning out the bones, and putting calcium back in the blood, sometimes overreacting. You get hypercalcemia. So swings in calcium ions in the blood is bad news. And that can be a problem. So you don't want to have a toxin moving around. You want to have it drip out slowly over years. It can take 10 years or more to slowly clear out oxalate from the tissues, and you don't want to have symptoms from it. So If you're getting really sick with oxalates, you might need that black tea times 2. You might need a jug of it in your refrigerator, extra strong, and find out if a cup of that helps you feel better. If it does help you feel better within an hour, then you're on target. If it doesn't do you any good, you need more of it. So you can experiment with either tea, rhubarb jam, or beet juice if you're in a crisis, but you may also need to do some alkalizing with some baking soda, lemon juice, and take some calcium because you're going into hypocalcemia and that's part of your symptoms. Taking calcium will cut those symptoms and make it safer because that's the most dangerous part of this is the vascular damage, the loss of calcium from the blood, and then the kidney damage that it can cause.
Have you heard of the eggshell lemon mix?
For some people, it works and other people, not so much. So, but those are things that are perfectly safe to play with. And that's a great approach to getting because calcium's the binder of oxalate. So the number one medication for oxalate overload is calcium. And we try to take basically about a half an eggshell a day worth of calcium and spread that out over four doses. So take some at bedtime, some in the morning, and then again during the day a couple times.
Yeah, it's interesting. So then it's drying out the eggshell, so making sure it's clean. It has to be a good quality eggshell. So dry it out, and then you add it to some lemon juice, and then you have a little bit of that, just a little bit. And then when you have some oxalate foods or something, you take it, and as you said, it binds to the calcium, the oxalate and the calcium, and then it just clears it from the system. So you mentioned that oxalate dumping is when you just like completely take out all of these foods that we just mentioned, and your body's freaking out. And so it's going to like take the crystals and put it into different places. I've seen people say I've got rashes or like I can't see properly. Is that signs of oxalate dumping?
Yeah, it is. The rash is very common, especially when you first start a diet. I didn't understand it. I first got off my sweet potatoes and Swiss chard in 2009, and I never connected it at the time, but I developed a huge like heat rash up and down my back, big welts, ugly looking, didn't itch, thank goodness. Some people get itchy. That's where there's more mast cells and histamine and stuff going on. But it just looks so weird. I took its picture because it never happened before. And then 3 years later, I got serious about the diet, and the same thing happened on the front of my body, across the clavicle and up on my face. And then later on, I thought about it. I was like, oh, I remember that other rash. That was also when I first started low oxalate. So I see those rash. Some people are prone to rashes and had some skin symptoms from their oxalate poisoning all along. Like for years, you can have these weird conditions and no one can help you. None of the treatments work when you have these oxalate poisoning symptoms like skin rash, permanent skin problems, and headaches or fatigue or kidney problems, chemical sensitivity, who knows? All those kind of things can be because you've been eating too much oxalate. Then you stop eating the oxalate, and often the first thing is a rash, but not in every case. Sometimes what you're going to see when you're clearing oxalates is extra grit in the eyes. So you might wake up in the morning and your eyes are like glued together with gunk, or you see dried white stuff on your cheek. You could get more tartar on the teeth. That's when your blood levels go up. Anyone who has a real big tartar problem is probably eating too many oxalates or clearing oxalates because they're now on a carnivore diet. You can see that cloudy urine coming and going. Sometimes you'll get flu-like symptoms that will feel like you've got an intestinal flu where you've got a lot of diarrhea for a week or two. I mean, there's just all kinds of things. Infections, urinary tract, symptoms of infection. Because oxalate in the bloodstream wrecks the white blood cells. It causes them damage. And they go into inflammatory stress. They start putting out pro-inflammatory cytokines, and they are incapable of fighting infection. So if you have chronic sinus infections, chronic ear infections, UTI type symptoms, and so on, it could be from the oxalate wrecking your immune system.
Gosh. Okay. Let's talk about positive stories. So you have seen a lot of people, helped a lot of people with their oxalate overloads and helping them clear it out and then reclaim their health. Do you have any success stories of one person that stands out as a success of clearing their oxalates and the health afterwards?
Well, a lot of stories stand out. I have about, I think it's 14 or 13 on my YouTube channel. These are like 16-minute videos. And there's a gal who was told she was going to need knee surgery for torn meniscus. And she figured out the oxalate thing, quit her smoothies, and her knee just healed. And she hiked in Switzerland with her daughter, and it's just fine. So she avoided surgery. We have a couple cases with eye issues. Sarah was going blind. She said she was blind. And by the time she had these literal, we have pictures of the chunky crystals that she took pictures of that came out of her eyes. And now she threads a needle and she's hemming her boyfriend's pants. That's really cool. I have a youngster whose mom was a client of mine. She told me that his 9-year-old self no longer needs glasses. I've had a lot of us no longer have night vision problems. I've had 3 people reverse cataracts from because this causes inflammatory stress, and oxidative stress clouds up the lens. And in some cases, you can reverse it. I've got a gal who was on the suicide list, was going to fly to Switzerland to die. And she was in just terrible pain with all kinds of brain issues and just couldn't function in any way. It's just suffering greatly. Real smart gal with PhD. And, we have a lot of people who are sick on this are very well educated. That's really sad. And she's she's functioning now. She has hope. She asked me for 6 months, should I die anyway? Is this bad for my children for me to be so sick and awful? And she now has great ambition to write about her case, and she's coming back. I've had 3 women, I think, who are in their early 30s who were bedbound and couldn't take care of themselves, could not brush their own teeth, could not feed themselves, needed help with bathing from their mom, their husband, whatever. They're out of bed. They're taking care of themselves.
Wow. So with your story that you mentioned with Sarah, I think it was, she was blind. She was going blind.
Going blind, yeah.
So what's her story? She took out the oxalates and she got her vision back.
Yeah, if you go on my YouTube channel, she's telling it directly herself. She would do a better job than I would. And Michael's another interesting case. So Michael was really into his almond stuff and whole wheat bread from the health food store. He was at the Rochester Co-op, where he worked at Kodak as an engineer. And he was going to the co-op as a young adult and getting all healthy, and it was just making him worse. And by the time he was 38, I think it was, he was diagnosed with osteoporosis. Now, this is an athletic young white man with osteoporosis at 38. And at 48, he was out on a dusk bike ride by himself with a mountain bike, took a spill, and it's a spill that probably would have strained his neck or shoulder. But what it did was crush all his neck vertebrae because he had osteoporosis from the high oxalate diet he was on. And so he is quadriplegic, his limited use of arms and so on. Really, arms and legs aren't working for him. He was 10 years into this injury when he's going carnivore and learning about oxalate and oxalate clearing. And now he's got recoveries that are impossible. He's got ability to speak louder. He can spit now. So his diaphragm and his intercostal muscles and those nerves and so on in the torso are working better. He has a spot on his arm now where he can feel something pleasant. He's had only unpleasant, buzzing, uncomfortable feelings in his skin, but he has an area now that can feel the blanket, can feel human touch, and feel pleasure. But most importantly of all, his depressed hopelessness that said to himself every day, why do I live? Why did I live? Why do I live? I hate my life. This is horrible. Now he's Michael. He's Mr. I got projects. I got things to do. I'm funny. I'm this and that. And he's got Michael back.
All from changing your diet, the power of what you can eat. Last question for you. So at the start, you mentioned vitamin C supplementation can also feed oxalates. Collagen powders as well through hydroxyproline.
Yeah. So in fact, all you need is a long time habit of maybe 6 months of a gram or 2 of vitamin C to get into trouble with oxalates. You don't need smoothies, potatoes, almonds. You just need some vitamin. It's bad enough. And I think there's probably variability on how much vitamin C is turned into oxalate in bodies. It's different person to person, probably based on how much oxidative stress you're already in. I think the healthier, younger person might take longer to be overloaded with oxalate. But I think that's probably the best way to put oxalate in your brain, because that vitamin C goes into the brain tissues and then can degenerate within the cells into oxalate.
And also the last one was B1 deficiency, thiamine deficiency can also feed oxalates.
Absolutely, it does. It causes problems with the enzymes in the liver and so on, where these precursor molecules that become oxalate are more. And so you produce more from the deficiency, and lack of B1 causes this enzyme to, normally we would shunt this thing called glyaxyl and glyoxylate. There's glyoxyl, glyoxylate, and what's the other one? But glyoxylate is this precursor to oxalate that is normally shunted to a non-toxic molecule, and B1 is the cofactor on that enzyme that does that. So if you don't have enough B1, it can't go in the non-toxic direction, and that normal toxin that builds up in the liver becomes oxalate. So B1 is so helpful, and there's a lot of forms now. And so sometimes you want to combine the forms. So start taking B1, and sometimes biotin can support the whole body's ability to not produce too much oxalate and to start getting the metabolic heft back into those mitochondria in the cells and help them do their thing.
As a final question, what would you tell someone that is maybe, my age, like 40 or something, and they have ill health and it could be oxalates? What would you tell them to take the next step?
Well, they have to be ready for a step. If they're willing to see that how they're living is probably contributing to their poor health and be like, it's time for a change, and you're looking for a change, this is the thing to do. Please consider evaluating your diet for these high oxalate foods, and just realize one at a time you can live without Swiss chard. If you didn't have spinach again, you'd probably be okay. You'll remember what it tastes like. Almond milk can easily be substituted with coconut milk. Like, they don't have to be carnivore to start seeing some improvements and start gradually changing. And it just a little bit of willingness to try and to keep learning and stay in the game, and come meet my website, meet my YouTube channel, meet some other people who are thriving and so happy to learn about oxalate. Like, hopefully they're open to that. And that's not everyone's case. The sad part is you can easily see people that need this. Once you learn this stuff, 1 out of 4 people that walks by or in your family, there's somebody that needs this. But the odds of them being open to it are probably 1 in 4.
Or even lower. That is absolutely brilliant advice. I'm going to link both your books, including Toxic Superfoods, in the show notes so people can click on that. It's important that people click on that link instead of searching for it, just to make sure that you get the authentic version of Sally's books. Sally, thank you so much for your time. You have been a wonderful reference of information, and people are just going to improve their health because of you. So thank you so much.
Well, I just love your professionalism, and it's so great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today on this episode with Sally Norton. Now, if you're learning from and enjoying these free episodes, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. That's an excellent zero-cost way to support what we do here. You can also find me on other social media accounts. I'm on Instagram and on Twitter under the name of The Primal Podcast. And if you love this episode, check out this one by Dr. Mark Bohanna. It is the #1 way to fix your oral microbiome. That's right, whatever goes in your mouth. He'll talk about the best oral care routine to fix your mouth and your health, including why you should never use mouthwash. Finally, thank you for your interest in root cause healing, and I'll see you next week.